Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to our March listening session. I really appreciate that you've joined us. And thanks to all of you that shared questions in advance of this session. There are a lot of questions that we'll go through that we received in advance of today, and appreciate that there's so much interest in housing and homelessness in our community. So we're trying something new this month. We have invited, I don't know if you can hear the geese behind me. I've got geese right outside the door. But we've invited Maureen Brewer, who is our Senior Housing and Community Development Manager, to join us today. We're trying something new because there's such interest right now in our community around affordable housing and the services that we provide or others provide to support those who are experiencing homelessness or to prevent homelessness. I wanted to invite Maureen to join us so that she too can answer questions about the work that we do as a city. Before I pass it over to Maureen, who will talk some about the Our Path Home partnership that exists in this community across multiple agencies and with many nonprofits and other service organizations, I just wanted to be known and to say myself that we at the City of Boise have a plan to address housing, to prevent homelessness, and to address homelessness in our community. And then it's through solid partnerships and the good work of people like Maureen that we're able to do this. We'll share more with you today related to those plans and the activities currently taking place, and also share more with you about future opportunities for our community to come together and talk about this topic. And with that, I will turn it over to Maureen to say hi.
Thanks, Mayor, and thank you all for having me join today. I'm happy to be here and to talk more about housing and homelessness with all of you. As the mayor mentioned, the City of Boise is the lead public agency for the public-private partnership called Our Path Home, and that partnership works to prevent, reduce, and end homelessness in Ada County. Our ultimate goal is that all of our residents have a home, and therefore everybody is safe, healthy, and housed. So the mission of the partnership is pretty straightforward. The solutions get a little bit more complicated, but the mission is to prevent homelessness whenever possible, to house people that fall into homelessness, so they're either sleeping in emergency shelter or on the street, as fast as we can, and then to ensure that when homelessness occurs, that episode of homelessness only happens one time. Further, our goal is to achieve something called net zero, also called functional zero. That means that we acknowledge that we can't prevent every episode of homelessness, but when such an episode does occur, that it's rare, that it's brief, and it only happens once. I also want to share that Our Path Home follows what is called a housing first philosophy. And housing first emphasizes just that, permanent housing, and providing that housing to adult-only households and families that are sleeping in emergency shelter or on the street. And then case managers that work throughout the Our Path Home partnership work with those households to connect them to the support services that they need to keep their housing and stay stably housed. As you all may well know, we have two site-based or project-based housing first developments in Ada County right now. One of those is New Path Community Housing, and the other is Valor Point. And then we have scattered site housing first units throughout the county. This is a best practice, an evidence-based practice that shows cost savings and cost avoidance. In our own community, we know that it works. In 2020, only 7% of those that the partnership housed through Housing First re-entered the homeless services system. So we also know that we need more units dedicated to this effort. The good news is essentially that because we have a relatively low number of individuals and families that are experiencing homelessness in Ada County, that our community can end homelessness. We can achieve net zero and avoid the fate that we've seen other communities, especially in the Northwest and up and down the West Coast, that the problems that we've seen them experience.
Well, thank you so much, Mayor, and thank you so much, Maureen. We have an American Sign Language interpreter with us today, Lavana Andrews. Thank you so much for being here. As always, we appreciate you. Now, I'll do my best to get to as many questions as possible. For questions that are similar in topic, which we did get quite a few similar in topic questions in the pre-questions. A lot of them were obviously on homelessness because that's what we asked for, and we appreciate it. And thank you for giving us those questions. Some of them I'm not necessarily sure who they're directed at, so I'll try to take my guess, but either one of you, the mayor or Maureen, if you want to weigh in, feel free. Some of them I'll paraphrase, so don't expect them to be read verbatim. If you're submitting questions to the YouTube page or while we're doing this, please include your name and your area of town so that we can answer your question directly to your area. I'll be turning off my camera as we go through this to better facilitate the American Sign Language interpreter. And with that, let's jump into the questions because we've got a lot. The first question I think is for the mayor, but if you want to jump in on it, feel free, Maureen. Could you explain in more detail the city's role in Our Path Home and share who the partners are?
I'm muted. Thanks for that question, Seth. So the city is just one of almost 50 partners in Our Path Home. We're the lead agency, so that means our role is to ensure that the various partners have the resources they need, the data they need, the information they need to be able to present solutions to be implemented by the partner agencies. So we help fund this work. Every year, the city has demonstrated a commitment to this work, and we support that work. Maureen is the lead administrator of Our Path Home, so helps ensure that collaboration occurs amongst all these 50 partners that are part of it as a staffer and the lead manager for community and housing solutions here at the city of Boise. And then other partners include Catch, Ada County, the city of Meridian, the hospitals in the area, other service providers who all come together to work out the solutions and ensure that housing is addressed, homelessness is prevented, and then services are available for those that need them. Oh, and because there's so many, I'm not able to name them all, or I'm not going to name them all right now, but if you can visit ourpathhome.org, and there you'll see a complete and comprehensive list of all the organizations, agencies, entities, what have you, that are involved with this partnership.
Thank you so much, Mayor. I almost had trouble doing my camera too. There's something about Zoom today. I think we're all struggling. Only a year in, we should know this by now. And if you wanted to weigh in, feel free, Maureen. But the next question I'll send your way. How many people in Ada County are experiencing homelessness?
Sure, thanks, Seth. You know, that is a difficult number to get entirely precise about. We work through varying data points to arrive at an estimate. I can tell you that in 2020, more than 2,000 individuals accessed our emergency shelter system. I can also tell you that coordinated entry, which is the access point to the homeless services system and where we assess individuals that are experiencing homelessness and do an assessment with them to see what the severity of their service need is, how long they've been experiencing homelessness, and then we prioritize them for housing interventions. And unfortunately, we have to prioritize folks because we don't have enough resources. We don't have enough housing units. Currently, on that queue, on the Our Path Home Connect queue, we have more than 650 households. There is approximately 300 families on that list and about 350 adult-only households. That is about the number of folks that are in our shelters each night. I know there's been a lot of interest around how many people we counted on during the point in time count on that one night in January. And we will have those numbers available to you in the next couple of weeks. But did want to let you know that that Connect queue, so that 650 or so households that we're working with right now, really does give us the most complete picture at any moment in time, the most concrete number that we have as far as the number of our community members that are experiencing homelessness and what the nature of their needs are.
Thank you, Maureen. The next question is probably the most popular one that we've received. It deals with interfaith, and people are curious what the relationship is between the City of Boise and the Interfaith Shelter Project.
Sure. So I'll address that too. The question I think many people have is what's the relationship, not between the project, but between the City of Boise and Our Path Home and Interfaith Sanctuary itself. Interfaith is one of those 50 agencies that is part of Our Path Home. And so Maureen, in her capacity as administrator with all the different partner agencies, including Interfaith, have collaborated on providing solutions to our community. And one thing I want to point out in particular, especially in this last year, as we've addressed the needs of COVID-19, we had a very close relationship with Interfaith Sanctuary because as a city, we wanted to ensure that COVID-19 spread as little as possible. And so we put together a vulnerable populations team within our own city government to ensure that the needs of our residents were met as we were shut down, as we were trying to prevent the spread of COVID, and of course, as COVID was spreading. And together, the city, with Our Path Home, but particularly our city staff, Maureen included, and Interfaith, came up with new ways through partnership to serve those experiencing homelessness. We were able to take families and those who are medically fragile, who are experiencing homelessness in the shelter, out of the shelter and provide them with individual hotel rooms so that they could stay together as a family, but be apart from others. And as COVID was spreading, we believe that that was so incredibly important. So that was, that's a specific example of how the city and Interfaith worked in the last year. Now going back to Our Path Home and that continuum of care where all the agencies work together to address the needs of our community, that Our Path Home, City of Boise is a partner in that, Interfaith is a partner in that, have long looked at how they could reimagine the service provision and providing of shelter to those experiencing homelessness within our community. And so while the city didn't ask Interfaith to come up with a new site or to submit application for a new proposal, we expect that we'll see that. But we have worked as a community, a collaboration to reimagine what shelter looks like in the future. And we've also learned from COVID-19 how many positive impacts there are when you remove people from a dorm shelter environment and instead provide them with their own own point of entry, their own door, their own home, if you will, from a hotel. And so because of that, Our Path Home with its partners have been discussing what shelter of the future ought to look like. But importantly, from the City of Boise's perspective and our engagement, how do we provide housing first to people within this community that need it, that are ready for it, or how do we get them ready for it? And so there's both the relationship from a shelter perspective and addressing COVID-19 needs, as well as a relationship through the strategizing of what shelter looks like in the future. And then our priority with city dollars and resources is to address housing first needs to get people out of shelter and into home.
Thanks so much, Mary. And if you have questions, get them in the YouTube chat box, submit them in the field. We actually just got one in right now that kind of is generally in the same vein as another question that we've been getting from a lot of folks, which is, does Our Path Home condone mega shelters? I know Deanna, I think it's Deanne, was just asking about the size of shelters and how that's important on the YouTube. So get your questions in the YouTube. We'll try to get to those once we get through this, but that one just happened to hit on a question I was getting from the forum. So I figured I'd combine the two.
And I can take that one, Seth. The simple answer is no. And I want to be clear that the project that Interfaith Sanctuary is proposing on State Street is not a mega shelter. Mega shelters serve communities after natural disasters such as a tornado or flood, hurricane, and they're made available to thousands of people that are evacuating that disaster. So Our Path Home has no mega shelters, and we have no plans as a partnership to create one. I want to stress that the plans and the goals that we do have, as we've specified so far this morning, center on housing first, and they center on increasing the supply of permanent housing that can be made available to households that are experiencing homelessness. So we're in a situation right now in the city of Boise and Ada County in which we're growing, and demand for housing is high, vacancy is very low. And so we have to be able to strike that balance between the crisis response, of which the emergency shelters are a part, and what we know is the solution to homelessness, which is housing. So while emergency shelters are intended to provide that safe place for individuals and families to stay while they're experiencing a crisis, we also, as the mayor indicated, are trying to evolve what that short stay looks like and what services are offered there so that we can triage, coordinate, and respond quickly and effectively. So there's really two very important best practices in terms of what emergency shelter services should include or ought to include. One is a focus on diversion, and that means that we're working with individuals and families that are seeking shelter to problem solve, to find another safe alternative other than entering shelter. The other is that if you have to enter shelter, if that is the safest place for you or your family to be tonight, that there is a concerted effort on rapid exit from that shelter and providing really housing focused services. So what barriers might an individual or a family be experiencing that's preventing them from accessing permanent housing as quickly as possible?
Thank you so much, Mary. The next question was probably after the interfaith questions, the most popular, and it's a pretty basic one. So I'll throw this at the mayor. What's the plan to end homelessness in our community?
Great question. And, I want to say too, before I'm talking about the different strategies that we have in place as a city and in partnership with our Path Home, that we have to do two things at once. And that is respond to the crisis, as a community, ensure that we have space available for those experiencing homelessness that need to be housed in shelter, et cetera, immediately, with the creation of long-term solutions to prevent homelessness. And so you see through the Our Path Home continuum, partnerships with shelters such as Interfaith that are addressing the crisis of the moment, with organizations, agencies, city, and others that are focused on long-term solutions. And Interfaith, of course, as they're thinking about what shelter looks like in the future and how it can improve and provide services, is a partner in that long-term solution brainstorming and strategy as well. So what the city is doing in partnership with all these groups to end homelessness is several things. In 2020, of course, we had to respond to COVID-19, make sure that people were housed in safe and healthy ways to prevent the spread of COVID, but also ensure that we were able to provide testing to move those in quarantine or isolate those who had COVID, and to ensure that people didn't end up unhoused as folks were facing financial difficulty, because that you never want people to lose their homes. That exacerbates homelessness, but also the most effective solution is to prevent homelessness to begin with. So by 2025, we hope to end family homelessness. And Maureen mentioned earlier the functional zero piece of that. There's an incredible committee of people that have come together to launch a campaign to address family homelessness. And as a city, we've committed funds that we want to use for long-term permanent supportive housing for families that are currently unhoused. We also have strategies to reduce first-time homelessness. That's where I talked about during COVID, before, now, and into the future. It's so important to keep people housed. So we've partnered with Jesse Tree by providing them with investment to prevent evictions. We've partnered with other organizations to ensure that people that are currently housed can stay housed. And just recently, you likely saw that we received federal stimulus dollars that we could put towards rental assistance for people in our community and county. That's so important because we want to ensure that our residents that are housed stay in the homes that they currently have. Another strategy is to scale our supportive housing efforts. I think Maureen mentioned earlier, but I might be wrong, that we have New Path, which is a permanent supportive housing development. And we also have Valor Point, another permanent supportive housing development, but specific to veterans. Those are two examples where we've been able to provide housing with the services needed to keep people housed in one development. And we want as a city to scale those services. We've seen more and more cities that have said that we're going to focus on permanent supportive housing as a way to get homelessness to zero. And so we started first with individuals, then with veterans, and we want to scale that. And that's where I referenced even putting our investment to end family homelessness towards permanent supportive housing for these families. And then, of course, as a city, we have to empower partners and empower partnership. We cannot do this alone. As housing prices rise, the number of people experiencing homelessness will rise. And so we need to ensure that we've developed partnerships to address homelessness itself, but also have created partnerships and policies to address the cost of housing, and do all that we can to ensure that we have enough homes, that it's possible to build the number of homes that we need at the budgets that we need, and that requires partnership as well. So for homelessness, the partnership is found in that Our Path Home, where we call on partners to help us provide solutions to the community. And then from a housing perspective, doing the same in partnership with those who build homes throughout the city.
Thank you so much, Mayor. Sorry, I was having trouble unblinking my camera there. I don't know what it is about Zoom today. The next question is, we've actually got it from a few folks online, and it was the next question we had in line too, dealing with kind of what role do emergency shelters play in solving homelessness? And I'll send this to Maureen. And then some folks kind of wondering about maybe not mega shelters, but large shelters, and what role they might play.
Okay, sure. So as the mayor and I have mentioned, we have to balance the night-by-night crisis that's happening in our community with the solutions to homelessness. So, of course, their role first and foremost is to help us manage that night-by-night crisis and into the daytime too, and providing daytime services. And as part of our COVID response throughout 2020, we also did stand up a day shelter to make sure that folks could get connected to the services they need, not just overnight, but during the day too, so that we're actively working on a problem-solving plan and a housing plan. So emergency shelters played a big part of that, as did our street outreach team. That team works to build rapport with people that might not be accessing shelter. You know, one of the most common reasons folks didn't access shelter over the course of 2020 and throughout this pandemic was because of COVID-19 and fears about getting COVID-19 by staying in a congregate setting. So we have a street outreach team that works really closely with Our Path Home Connect, that coordinated entry access point that I mentioned, and all of our emergency shelters to ensure that we can get as many folks connected to shelter as possible, so that we're not putting people in a lose-lose situation where perhaps they're staying in their car because they want to stay together as a family, for example. So I want to just be clear that while emergency shelters play a role and they are part of the solution, again, because the city is growing and because the vacancy rate is so low, it takes time to bring affordable, units onto the market. It takes more time to bring affordable units onto the market. And then that affordability piece is really just one part of what you might call achievable housing. So we need units that are dedicated, reserved, accessible to people experiencing homelessness and the barriers that might come alongside that. And that means that we have to have property owners, property managers, landlords that are willing to rent to our clients, to the residents that we're trying to serve. So emergency shelter's role in that is to manage that crisis for us while we are heavily investing in an intentional and strategic way in housing that's affordable for all income levels, including those experiencing homelessness, and making sure that we're targeting where the need is in terms of the types of housing that our community needs and the price points at which they need it.
Thanks, Maureen. And that actually kind of leads into the next question that we had here that was looking at where the shelters are. And some folks are wondering, like, why all the shelters are in Boise? Why can't they be in other parts of Ada or Canyon County? And why specific areas?
Sure. Why don't I take that, Seth? Boise is the largest city in Ada County, and so the shelters tend to be in Boise and Ada County. I imagine majority of that reason is because more of the services are nearby, and so we've seen in this city there's access to healthcare, to mental health services, et cetera, day shelter that those experiencing homelessness need. And then in Canyon County, actually, there are shelters too. And they're in Nampa and Caldwell, and really for the same reason. That's where there's a concentration of services that are needed within that community. And so, pretty simple answer, but it does come down to where services are available, and that's the important partnerships that exist to ensure that those services are able to be deployed.
Thank you, Mayor. And kicking things. There's kind of a follow-up question of how that decision is made on where the shelter will go. I don't know if you want to take that one, Maureen.
Yeah, I'm happy to sort of speak to that. Citing a homeless services project, whether it is a housing project or a shelter, is hard, right? So there's some basic criteria that need to be met, those being, and the mayor just touched on this, that it's close to services and it's close to transit. So while we acknowledge that citing any kind of homeless services project is hard, especially when it involves a neighborhood, the challenge is that it inevitably will involve a neighborhood. Boise has beautiful, livable neighborhoods, and we all want to preserve that livability, especially as we're growing. And so citing these projects gets particularly difficult when we go to do that. I think generally speaking, Boiseans really agree that we need to serve these community members, that everyone deserves a home, including those experiencing homelessness. And the reality of the situation is that we don't have enough housing to offer an immediate solution. And like I said, that housing takes a while to come online. So while in one respect it might feel like we're concentrating certain projects, we're trying to cite projects based on where services are, what real estate may or may not be available. And then the other part of that too, what I would sort of encourage residents to remember or to know is that yes, we have a handful of site-based projects. So the two that the mayor and I have mentioned, New Path and Valor Point, and they're hoping to do more of those. And we have a handful of shelters in the city of Boise. Interfaith is one of those. But we also have nearly 500 units of supportive housing across the county. And while that strategy works and works quite well, again, we're sort of challenged by the willingness, if you will, for property owners and managers to house our tenants in those types of settings. So it's a both and approach, providing that right balance in terms of crisis response, really making a concerted effort to have a plan around how many site-based projects we really need, and then the makeup of that, if you will, with scattered site housing units across the county.
Thank you so much, Maureen. We're getting towards kind of the end of the questions that were pre-submitted. So if you have questions, put them into the YouTube or submit them to the form. And I'll try to start getting to them. I'll probably try to get to the people who submitted first on housing and homelessness topics, and then I'll kind of start moving on to the other stuff once we get through those, since we're trying to kind of focus on homelessness today. But the next question was submitted by quite a few people, and it's kind of reflected in here, but what are the next steps? How can people be heard over the next couple of months as we're trying to deal with homelessness in Boise?
Oh, great. That's a great question. So there are a couple things. First off, I know we've gotten questions too about the shelter specifically. So we do anticipate that Interfaith will file a permit request with the city of Boise. And so specific to that location, the programs that they propose and the permits that they need to do that, there'll be opportunity for the public to weigh in. And that's when the Planning and Zoning Commission and then the City Council most likely will hear from the public at both venues and make a decision on the location, but also the parameters around operating and the expectations that they might have for the request that's presented to them. So there's that. There's the official land use planning process for the shelter itself that we expect that they'll file, in the next month or so. But then in general, we want to make sure that as a city, we are having a conversation about the values that we all bring to this community, the importance of ensuring that we have a home for everyone, and the ways that we can come together to address the needs that we see now, the needs we expect in the future as our community continues to grow, and the solutions that we ought to implement. So in the next week or so, we'll be able to announce a plan that we have to engage the community. And so look for that from the city of Boise. We'll be announcing details of activities, convenings, dates, et cetera, because we want to hear from people, not just your concerns, but your suggestions. And we want partnership with not only Our Path Home, but the community in meeting these pressing needs at this time. The first opportunity to engage, I'll just give you a little teaser, will be a roundtable with me and some Our Path Home partners. And so what we'll do with that, it'll be a virtual roundtable, and it'll be an opportunity first to hear from various partners that participate in the Our Path Home continuum of care. I'm talking about the services they provide, the need that they know currently exists, and as I referenced before, the reimagined services and shelter that they've been working on to share that with the community. And then after that, we'll be able to have virtual breakouts where we can talk in smaller groups about the issues at hand and ideally come up with some solutions that we all seek to implement together and to have a better understanding of the need to provide services and to anticipate the needs of the future as we continue to grow. And then probably around the end of April, beginning of May, if all goes well from a public health perspective, we'll be able to offer neighborhood conversations. So more intimate opportunities to discuss the program that needs to occur in this community to support those preventing and then those experiencing homelessness at a neighborhood level in some parks throughout the city. So that and more and other more details to come in the next week or so from the city on ways that all of you can continue to engage with us on that topic.
Thank you, Mayor. And we got quite a few questions from Clay from the Northwest, and Clay's my dad's name, so I had to take at least one of his. And I think we answered some of his questions as we were kind of going generally through those. But one of the things he answered that I thought was really interesting, and either the mayor or Maureen, you can jump on this. How can people like outside the city get engaged and help out with homelessness?
Maureen, yeah, Seth, you might need to repeat the question because I wasn't quite sure the end of it. But I think it was about different ways that people can help engage. And so Maureen might be able to talk more about programs.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. So I think the mayor just sort of walked through the community outreach opportunities that we're hoping to launch in the next several weeks. And then as far as engaging with the partner agencies and the partners ourselves, part of the campaign to end family homelessness, which we're really looking to kick off in a very intentional public way in the summer, will include some tours of the partner agencies so people can come by, see what we do, see how we interact with our clients and residents that are experiencing homelessness, the services we offer, how we do that in client-centered, and trauma-informed ways to meet clients where they are. We have a really, committed and bright staff that's working throughout the partnership on connecting folks to the services they need. And I recognize that Interfaith Sanctuary and their proposed project has really generated a lot of interest in homelessness. And so I think it behooves us and the partnership to make sure that residents understand, A, what the plan is, and then B, really to, I think you said Clay submitted that one, Seth, that residents understand sort of where they can engage and where they can learn more about what it is that we do, how it is that we deliver those services, the challenges we face in doing so, but also the opportunity. And I think we have a pretty significant opportunity. If there was a silver lining to COVID, it's that we are coming in on unprecedented investment from the federal government to go at this issue. And we're working closely, the city is working closely with Our Path Home and its partner agencies to make sure that we leverage those fund dollars, those federal fund dollars, and assign them to their highest and best use. And so I think some of the opportunity that community residents will have to engage, and as the mayor said, to offer suggestions over the coming weeks, will be on how, we invest those funds, where we invest those funds, what type of projects those funds support.
Thank you, Maureen. We got a first question from Eric, but I'm seeing that there's a few other that are similar to what Eric was asking. But what's being done to preserve existing rental places and keep people in their homes and create more affordable rental places so that people don't end up homeless in the long run?
Yeah, why don't I take at least the front half of that? I just had this cross my inbox today, and I'm excited to share it with you all that the city and the county and the housing authority partnered to deploy the emergency rental assistance program. So that's federal dollars from the Treasury. It's just shy of 25 million, and we expect to receive additional funds in the few short weeks since we've launched that program. It's been 3, maybe 4 weeks. We have deployed $3.2 million to Ada County and Boise residents, almost 700 households, to keep them stable, to keep them housed, to keep them out of the homeless services system. So when I talk about leveraging federal dollars, it's just that, positioning resources where they're needed most, where we and the mayor are hearing from residents that they need help, and making sure that we get those resources out quickly and effectively.
I can, thank you, Maureen. I can jump in with a little bit on the policy side too. And I really do want to emphasize how important partnerships are, because that's how we're able to do most of this work. And we anticipate, as Maureen said, additional dollars, and we want to make sure that we're using them in a highly strategic way that, again, balances the crisis needs of the moment with long-term solutions to scale. And so that's what we'll be thinking about moving forward with funding. But on what the city's doing in the last year, and I guess going back to the tie between, and I think it was Eric, yeah, Eric alluded to it, the rents going up, needing to have more places that are rentable, et cetera, the tie between housing costs and rising number of those experiencing homelessness. And so we as a city have said in this last year that we've got to do more, faster, and then we need to try new things. We have invested in a housing land bank or land trust where we are making sure that land that we have can be put out for housing proposals at affordable rates. And so we tie the need of affordability, the different various price points, to requirements that we expect to see in those apartments in exchange for use of the land that the city has. We're trying to consolidate all of our tool yards and these different things, and doing that so that we can take more city land and make it available for affordable housing. We just passed this last week a housing incentive that will allow us to forgive impact fees, but actually use some of the funds that we've set aside for affordable housing to pay for those impact fees in exchange for homes that are built at particular budgets, so percent of average median income. We also have a housing bonus ordinance now that allows the city to negotiate density, number of parking spaces, height, other things in exchange for affordable housing. We will continue to look at other tools that we ought to put into place so that we can, one, have more housing available, but two, have that housing that becomes available, particularly where we're involved, be at budgets that Boiseans can afford so that we can get people housed. And then, of course, very, very importantly, we will continue to invest in eviction prevention. The emergency rental assistance program that Maureen mentioned is an important one and a very large scale program because of the federal dollars. But we as a city will continue to invest in organizations like Jesse Tree that keep people housed, because we know that that is the most impactful way to address homelessness, is to prevent it from occurring in the first place.
Thank you, Mayor. And this next question is, I think it first came from Kathy, but we actually got it from a few people. Are people tested for COVID when they enter shelters? Are they being vaccinated? What are kind of the COVID protocols that are going on in shelters? And I guess I'll throw this at Maureen first, but yeah.
Happy to take that one, Seth. Sure. So a year ago, more actually, we got together all of the emergency shelters, both hospital systems, Family Medical Residency of Idaho, got together. We've been meeting at least weekly ever since. And the plan that we put in place essentially is that FMRI, Family Medical Residency of Idaho, has been at our shelters, rotating at them every night, just about every night for well over a year. And they've been screening and they've been testing. And then any of those that are positive or presumed positive, we have moved into a hotel space where they are isolated and quarantined until it is safe for them to sort of rejoin the shelter setting. So we've had screening and testing going on routinely for the last year. And then again, FMRI, as our medical partner, has been rounding at the hotel to ensure that we're really doing a good job of making sure that we're managing symptoms, et cetera. Because we did that screening and testing, we really have limited the impact of how many of our residents experiencing homelessness ended up having COVID or had symptoms of COVID. So really, honestly, quite proud of the work that we did there. We've also been partnering with both hospital systems and FMRI to start getting people experiencing homelessness vaccinated. So we're having to follow the state schedule, but just a couple of weeks ago, that was open to all residents or city residents experiencing homelessness. There is some vaccine hesitancy among that group, and they think that's, that extends beyond people experiencing homelessness too. But because they have such a trusting relationship with staff, particularly our medical provider, we are seeing progress in terms of getting folks vaccinated. I will also share that we are lucky enough to get to use the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which is just the one shot, so that we don't have to sort of try to arrange that second shot or call people out of work or make sure that we can find them on that right day and time to get them their second shot. And so all of that, when the mayor talks about partnership and the fact that no one agency can do it alone, I mean, this last year has really put a fine point on that in terms of our COVID-19 response. And I'll kind of end by saying, and it's just a huge kudos to our shelters and hospital systems and medical provider, but we had a technical assistance provider from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development join a few of our planning calls, because they said, listen, we got to know how you all in Boise are doing this, because you're having success that we're not seeing in other communities. So it was fun to kind of info share and honestly sort of pat ourselves on the back for the last year, because it's been a wild ride, and it's taken a lot of committed partnerships to achieve the outcomes that we have.
Thank you so much, Maureen. I think that was a really good explanation. Some of these last questions I think are going to be on your plate, Maureen, because they're a little bit more specific about sheltering. But Healing Arts Boise, who could be a company, but I'm assuming it's an individual connected to that company, was asking about addiction services, mental illness services being offered in shelters, and kind of how those services work in the individual shelters.
Yes, so the shelters certainly offer those services. I don't think it will be a surprise to residents that there is a dearth of the amount of services available. We're really trying to work closely with the state of Idaho and the Department of Health and Welfare to expand the services and the eligibility of those services in the state plan, so that our clients, our residents experiencing homelessness and experiencing these issues, have easier, more direct access to receiving those. We're sort of challenged by how that billing process is set up right now. So while those services are offered, it's not dissimilar to sort of if you zoom out and look at the whole situation, it's not dissimilar to the fact that we know we need to increase our supply of housing that's affordable and achievable. We also know that we need to increase the access to services that folks, whether they're experiencing homelessness or not, need in terms of addiction services and mental health services.
Thank you. And there's a kind of a couple of questions kind of along the lines of, in this general area of like, are there best practices for dealing with homelessness in shelters, or is it kind of like each shelter works differently?
In our community, we have shelters that have varying philosophies, and that's why we need sort of widespread resources and different types of resources offered. The two primary best practices around shelter are diversion. So let's have a problem-solving conversation with you, make sure that you're safe, but really figure out and try to mediate, if we can, whether you need to access shelter. And then B, ensuring that if you do need to access shelter, the services that we offer you are housing oriented. So they're removing barriers to housing rather than asking clients or residents to jump through a series of hoops before we decide that you're deserving of such a thing. Our Path Home and the city of Boise too believes that everybody deserves a home. And that's certainly, the intent behind the mayor's strategic initiative to house everyone, to find a home for everyone.
Thanks, Maureen. And we're getting towards the end. I think we got probably time for two more. And the one that kind of hasn't been addressed yet, there was one from Aaron, who's a landlord, who is saying like they would like to provide affordable housing, but sometimes the property tax and costs are too much for them to do it. Is there anything that they can do to cover the risks associated with being a landlord of affordable housing?
I can take, oh, Mayor, you're muted. Go ahead.
Nope, go. If I was, am I unmuted now? I don't.
Yes.
This is the first time we've done this with two speakers, so I'm not so great at the unmuting thing. Maureen, you were about to jump in with some of that, so I think I'll have you go, and then probably address some of the policy implications in my closing remarks.
Okay, that sounds great. I love this question. It made my heart flutter a little bit. One, in this sort of package of strategies that the mayor reviewed with you, one new thing that we're trying, that we're piloting, and that will be officially launched, we're kind of testing it right now, but will be officially launched in that midsummer timeframe, is a landlord partnership program. And we've sort of delineated a handful of different tools or incentives that we can use to help make up that gap between the risk that a landlord's taking and the benefits too, if they partner with us and if they work with us. I think previously in sort of an older iteration of our Path Home, we really relied on tugging at people's heartstrings. And certainly there's a place for that. But we've also evolved to a place where there's this deep recognition that landlords have needs as well, and property owners have needs as well. And we need to be able to make kind of that economic case and fill that gap if we're going to be able to better access units that are already on the market and build those relationships with property managers and owners.
Thanks so much, Maureen. And this last one, we kind of answered in the beginning, but we've got a couple of questions later on, so they may have just missed it in the beginning. But if we could kind of go over what Our Path Home's role is and who the partners are and how they work in the community. And then I think that's going to be have to be our last question before we wrap up.
Okay, yeah, happy to recap that. Our Path Home is a public-private partnership. The City of Boise is the lead agency. There are nearly 50 partner agencies that coordinate around a single mission, which is to prevent homelessness whenever possible, reduce how often it happens and for how long it happens, and ultimately achieve net zero or functional zero. And that means that we recognize we won't ever be able to prevent every instance of homelessness, but when it does occur, we want it to be brief, rare, and one time. So all of the emergency shelters are part of that partnership. The hospital systems are part of that partnership. The school districts, our housing intervention agencies, the Boise City Ada County Housing Authorities, Catch, Jesse Tree, the WCA. I'm gonna miss some. So the mayor offered up at ourpathhome.org. We have a list of all of the formal partners of the partnership. But essentially, we have all agreed to come around this coordinated access point where we help problem solve with folks and make a housing plan. So how quickly can we move you out of homelessness? There's huge opportunity there, and there's a lot of opportunity to sort of leverage each other's strengths and expertise. We are also challenged by issues that sort of are outside of the partnership's purview of control, wages, housing supply versus the demand, et cetera. But, you know, I would just maybe close with the thought that we do have a highly functional partnership and we're all rowing in the same direction. And I think with some of these federal funds coming online in the next couple of months and those investments, plus the mayor's focus and intention to really go at housing in a strategic and quick way so that we can make gains for people that don't have housing or that are struggling to maintain it.
Well, thank you so much, Maureen, and thank you so much, Lavana, for doing our interpretation today. Thank you, Mayor, as always, for being here. And thank you so much for everyone who submitted questions. We got so many great questions today. Sorry to those that had questions that weren't really homelessness focused. We're gonna have another listening session in April. We're going to get to more stuff, but we kind of wanted to focus on this topic. I hope you guys liked kind of this very focused way of going about it. And with that, I wanted to turn it over to the mayor to put a cap on the listening session for today. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks, Seth. Thanks, Lavona. And thanks, Maureen, for joining me today to talk in so much deeper detail about the work being done by the city, but also by the partnership of Our Path Home. You know, I just want to leave us with this, and I want people to think about this because it's so important. We have an opportunity to do what other cities haven't done, because while we are addressing the needs of our community and we're attempting to address affordable housing, we have a relatively small number of people within our community experiencing homelessness. And so we can get ahead of this issue by being very strategic in the ways we focus on affordable housing, the ways we prevent homelessness, and then, of course, the ways that we serve those currently experiencing homelessness with that intent to move them quickly towards house and home. And many cities weren't able to do this because they didn't have the retrospective ability to look at what had happened in other places and see patterns. They weren't able to do it before the numbers of those experiencing homelessness got to a tipping point. And it is our deep desire and intention to partner with people throughout the city to, in many ways, do what we did with COVID, learn from the experience of others, innovate to provide services, and as quickly as possible, offer solutions to the community in partnership with all of you, because we cannot do it alone. So if there's nothing more that you take home, please know that we have a strategy. We have highly functioning, as Maureen said, partnerships already, but we need more. This is really, from a housing perspective, an all hands on deck moment for our community to address affordability, the number of homes that we have, and then to prevent as often as possible and as quickly as possible homelessness within the city. So thanks so much for your care and attention to this matter, for all the questions that you shared with us. Look forward to continuing this conversation in particular into April and May. And then, of course, our next listening session in April too. Take care, everybody. Stay healthy and be well. Bye-bye.